Peter Zalmayev. I know Ukrainians feel as though Germany could be doing more to support Ukraine. After this agreement, will public opinion be more sympathetic to Germans who are taking a hit with this?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. There's a little bit of a displeasure, to say the least, with Germany's indecision over the last few weeks and months, after having said all the right things. Having promised the deliveries of weapons, Germany's been very reluctant to follow suit. Then there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding between the two countries, needless to say, even though Germany, once again, it has to be noted, just approved $1 billion in aid to Ukraine. That's pretty significant. And obviously, this would not have been possible, the oil embargo, without Germany's direct intercession. But once again, folks, we are discussing the merits of this sanctions policy, and it's a very correct policy to follow from the moral standpoint, but from the efficacy standpoint, I don't need to remind our viewers that sanctions generally have had a very poor track record throughout history in correcting bad behavior. It is more than clear to us here in Ukraine and hopefully to our partners that the only way to persuade Vladimir Putin to change his ways is through military success, and that's why Ukraine is agitating for speedier deliveries of weapons. By all accounts, the Russian economy is suffering, but it is not clear that Russians will be motivated, to turn on their leaders just because they're not, able to access McDonald's, and other Western brands. It seems like Russians are, have been fed a steady diet of propaganda where they will be probably just going along with the privations that they're facing. And once again, it's only through a victory on the battlefields that Ukraine will be able to restore the status quo to at least, the pre-February 24th borders.
Yeah, because there's of course the possible boomerang effect. What with when the price of oil, if the price of oil goes up, Russia could benefit from it. We can crunch the numbers in a moment, perhaps with Thierry Bros. But I just want to read to you, Peter, a reaction on Telegram by Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev. And he says, "They hate us all!" Exclamation point. The basis for these decisions is hatred for Russia, for Russians, and for all its inhabitants. How much political capital does Russia gain from being under embargo?
Well, first of all, Mr. Medvedev is a very questionable kind of spokesman. He is trying his best to look macho, even though he's a very emasculated leader, and he's also said to be an alcoholic. That is actually a well-known fact. It seems like Putin's aides are at pains to show themselves as the biggest hawks. It seems like there may already be some kind of a power struggle afoot in case the leadership decides that Vladimir Putin may need to step down. We just don't know what goes on behind these Byzantine, doors of Russian power. But yes, so far Russians have been able to sort of, to rally the public around the idea of Russia as a besieged fortress. Once again, what's helped them is a very simple fact that they've cracked down on all independent media. They've closed down Instagram and Facebook. They are actually considering, as we speak, closing down YouTube. That may also be a reality. The question is how long they'll be able to do that. You can lie to some people some of the time. You can lie to all people some of the time, but you cannot lie to all people all the time. I think that dictum, even in the case of Russia, remains true.
This conversation concerns you, what with Ukraine now hooked up to Europe's electricity grid.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Ukraine has been, Ukraine has actually had a very, tough kind of task and all this time. You keep in mind the absurd situation that Russia has been pumping its gas to Europe, to European markets, using Ukraine's pipelines that go through Ukraine's territories. So you have to give the Ukrainian government credit for protecting this pipeline. It would have been, it is a very obvious target for Ukrainians who would like to, damage, Russia's economic prospects. So far, the gas keeps flowing. But what you said about electricity, so far we have the city of Rivne in closer to the western part of Ukraine that has been experimenting with, this new format of being, connected to the European electricity grid. And the sooner the rest of the country follows suit, the better. We need to cut this umbilical cord that connects us with the Russian Federation in many areas, not just this, but the very transport, the railways. Part of the snag that we're facing with this grain, supplies of grain that have been languishing in the port of Odessa, why we cannot reroute it using land over to Europe is because of the different gauge of our rails, which is a legacy of the Russian Empire. This should have been done a long time ago, but I guess we will have to get cranking and start doing this pretty soon after our victory. Yes, I would agree. So Russia is obviously once again playing, trying to act all macho and to bluff and to pretend that it's nothing really it gets to it. But at the end of the day, it will. And the sanctions will also hurt. But once again, I think it's the military that needs to the military successes by Ukraine that will shift Putin's calculation. And in this light, I'll just like to add on this note of concern that we have been watching this phone diplomacy that Chancellor Scholz and President Macron have engaged in with Vladimir Putin for several hours. We don't understand what could be discussed in these several hours.
Well, one of the things, Peter, that's being discussed is, and there's a UN delegation in Moscow today, is opening up the Black Sea. If there's success on that front, wouldn't that be win-win?
I'm very skeptical on this front. Vladimir Putin made it clear that he would do this in exchange for lifting sanctions precisely. I think Europe needs to consider whether it needs to, accept Vladimir Putin's bluff and meet it with a bluff of its own. We have, I would actually suggest that Europe considers as some kind of an escort, a humanitarian escort that would go and actually, try to take this grain and have Russia then decide whether it would, launch missiles at such an escort. I think once again, Vladimir Putin is bluffing, and Europe needs to really step up to Vladimir Putin.
Do you understand the senator's position?
I understand the senator's position, but I think that we've already sat down. The West has sat down with Putin on numerous occasions, including with the help of your former President Sarkozy in 2008 in Georgia, and all it did is establish a new status quo, ratify a land grab, and embolden Vladimir Putin to go on and do other crazy things, all the way up to the invasion of the biggest land-based war in Europe's post-war history. And let me just add to this the deblocading idea. I'm not advocating a direct military confrontation between the West and Russia, but for example, enabling Ukraine to deblocade on its own would actually assist in the process of persuading Putin diplomatically to do it. And I think Denmark made a very, very courageous move. It gave Ukraine anti-ship harpoon missiles. And very soon Ukraine will be able to deblocade on its own. And that's when diplomacy will actually have a chance to work.